Have you ever wondered why menopause seems to change more than your hormones? Why things you used to tolerate suddenly feel unbearable? Why the stress you've managed for years suddenly feels overwhelming? Why you can no longer ignore the exhaustion, the anxiety, the resentment, or that quiet feeling that something in your life no longer fits? What if menopause isn't creating these struggles? What if it's revealing patterns your nervous system has been carrying for decades? Today, we're talking about why this transition often turns up the volume on old survival patterns, and why that may be one of the greatest opportunities for healing that you'll ever experience. Welcome to Healing Beyond the Symptoms, the podcast that helps people discover the root causes of their health struggles and take back control with science, strategy, and self-awareness. I'm Dr. Leah Hahn, a chiropractor and functional wellness doctor who believes that true healing starts beneath the surface. So let's dive in. In our last episode, we explored why menopause is far more than a hormonal transition. We talked about how changing levels of estrogen and progesterone affect more than the reproductive system. They also affect the brain, the autonomic nervous system, and our ability to adapt to stress. We discussed why so many women suddenly find themselves feeling more anxious, more overwhelmed, more emotionally reactive, more exhausted, or more disconnected from themselves during this phase of life. Most importantly, we explored the idea that menopausal symptoms are not signs that the body is failing. They may be messages from a nervous system that is recalibrating and asking for something different. And we ended with an important realization. Menopause often turns up the volume on patterns that have been living beneath the surface for years. Patterns related to stress, coping strategies, and survival mechanisms we may have carried throughout our lives. Because menopause doesn't create people-pleasing, it doesn't create perfectionism, it doesn't create overfunctioning, and it doesn't create emotional suppression. Instead, it often shines a spotlight on patterns that have quietly shaped your life for years. Patterns that may have once helped you survive, but may no longer be serving you. Why they become much more noticeable during menopause, and why awareness, not self-judgment, is the first step toward healing. Menopause has a way of turning up the volume. Many women begin to notice unresolved nervous system patterns that may have developed while coping with trauma, overwhelm, or chronic stress. Not because menopause creates trauma, but because hormonal shifts can reduce the body's ability to suppress old stress patterns. These nervous system patterns live in the body, and they show up in our behavior. They may include things like overfunctioning, people-pleasing, perfectionism, emotional suppression, constant caregiving, hyperindependence, or living in chronic productivity mode. These patterns are intelligent. They are not failures. At one point, they likely helped you function. They helped you stay connected. They helped you succeed. They may have helped you survive. But over time, the body can become stuck in those protective patterns, even after the original stress has passed. That can show up as chronic tension, shallow breathing, hypervigilance, difficulty relaxing, emotional suppression, fatigue, feeling disconnected from yourself, or constantly feeling on. For many people, these patterns have existed for so long that they simply feel normal. One way to think about it is like this. Imagine driving a car with the emergency brake slightly engaged for years. Eventually, you adapt to the strain. You learn to function that way, but it requires more effort, more energy, more compensation, and over time, it can cause damage to the car. Then menopause arrives, and the body can no longer compensate in the same way. So many women have spent years overriding their body's signals in order to survive, to succeed, or to stay connected. Over time, those responses become automatic nervous system patterns. They become embedded in the body and the mind. They're no longer just conscious choices. The goal is not to force change, and it is not to relive the traumas that may have created those patterns. The goal is to help the nervous system become more aware of what it's been unconsciously holding. Because awareness creates the possibility for reorganization. And it's important to remember this. A calm body creates a calm mind. And when the nervous system is functioning well, when it's regulating, when it has the capacity to reorganize and function differently, and it's healing, everything else can work more effectively. Things like affirmations, your wellness strategies, exercise that you fit into your week, supplements, and other healing tools. They can all work more effectively together when the nervous system is functioning well. So remember, a calm body equals a calm mind. So what can regulation feel like? As the nervous system becomes more regulated and begins to reorganize, many people notice changes. They breathe more deeply. They sleep more easily. They feel calmer, more connected to themselves, more emotionally aware, and more adaptable to stress. Not because they are fixing themselves, but because the body is no longer working so hard to stay protected. The body may have developed that protective state to help you navigate events that happened 20, 30, 40, or more years ago. Sometimes the body has simply become very practiced at survival. Remember that the body is not broken. It's patterned, and patterns can change. When we focus on healing the nervous system, becoming more regulated, and moving into reorganization, incongruencies in our lives can begin to reveal themselves. So what do I mean by incongruency? It's the gap between who you are and how you're living. It's the gap between what you value and what you're tolerating. Incongruency can look like saying yes when you mean to say no, not holding true to your boundaries, staying in relationships that don't feel safe or true, living by expectations that don't actually belong to you, performing a version of yourself that once kept you accepted, but now feels exhausting, ignoring what your body is asking for, or making decisions that don't honor who you are or what you need. These patterns often come from conditioning, things that have happened to us, traumas, and methods of coping with stress. They often reflect what you learned you had to do to feel loved, to feel safe, to feel accepted, or even successful. These patterns are stored in the body. They can shape your physiology, your thoughts, your behavior, your emotional tone, and your mind. At one point, they likely served you. But now the question becomes, does the life I am living still reflect who I am? Realize that the tension that is developing is not the enemy. One of the signs of a healthy, evolving person is the ability to recognize when something needs to change, when something new needs to emerge. And here's something important. The tension created by incongruency, the discomfort, the irritability, the overwhelm. It's not necessarily something you need to get rid of. When I work with clients who are in the midst of change and healing, I often describe that tension as fuel. It's energy that can move you into awareness, into truth, and into action. So this is where healing really begins to shift. Healing isn't about forcing your body to stop reacting. It's about gently transforming what your body is reacting to. When something feels off, whether it shows up as anxiety or pain or intense hot flashes or fatigue or brain fog, tension, temperature changes, or overwhelm, the body may be speaking. These aren't failures. They may be protective strategies. So instead of asking, how do I make this stop? What if you asked, what is this showing me? What is this revealing about how I'm living? And over time, what if you responded with kindness to what it revealed? Because when stress responses repeat, they form patterns in the nervous system. And those patterns continue until the system learns a new way to respond. So that's what healing really is. It's not suppressing, it's not overriding, but reorganizing, creating awareness, acknowledging what you learn, and making shifts over time. When those deeper shifts happen, something changes. You don't have to force calm. You don't have to convince yourself that you're okay. You simply are. You're more regulated. You're more resilient and more at home in your body. So you can use stress as information. When your system has more safety and adaptability, and when you're living with more balance between fight or flight and the parasympathetic nervous system, something also becomes available. And that's clarity. You can begin to use stress and symptoms as information. You can feel the difference between what is aligned in life and what isn't. This is where symptoms can begin to shift from something you fight to something that guides you. Signals that may be showing you that something in your life is no longer aligned with who you truly are. And that's why I often say that menopause, perimenopause, can be a time of permission, a time of telling the truth, not just the surface level truth, but the deeper truths your body may have been holding for a long time. My goal is that you create space to listen. Accessing that truth requires something many people do not give themselves: space, quiet, time to listen. If you're constantly busy, constantly distracted, or simply trying to get through the day, it can become difficult to recognize what's misaligned. This important work begins simply by creating moments of pause, by reconnecting to your body, and by being willing to acknowledge what you actually find, because you cannot heal what you don't acknowledge. Menopause can bring clarity to what needs to be healed. And yes, that can be uncomfortable, but it's also where freedom begins. The body always knows. You can override your thoughts, you can rationalize your choices, but your body keeps track of what is true. It may whisper through discomfort. It may nudge through tension. And sometimes it may speak loudly through pain, anxiety, or intensified symptoms. Not to punish you, but to bring you back into alignment. Congruency feels different. It can feel like ease instead of force, clarity instead of confusion, groundedness instead of internal conflict, a sense of coming home to yourself. And creating that congruency doesn't require a complete life overhaul overnight. It begins with small, honest shifts, speaking a truth you've been holding back, setting a boundary that reflects your needs, choosing rest instead of pushing through, allowing yourself to want something different. Each shift moves you closer to a life that actually fits you. And in that process, something else becomes clear. Healing is about removing what isn't you, the conditioning, the expectations, the roles you learn to play. And what is left is something much more real, and that's you. So what is all of this guiding you towards? Instead of thinking, how do I get rid of this? How do I get rid of perimenopausal symptoms? Try asking, what is this guiding me toward? Because when you learn to recognize incongruency and you find the courage to shift it, pain stops feeling like the enemy. It becomes part of the guidance system that leads you back to yourself. And realize that you're not trying to go back. By creating space for healing, space for awareness, and space for acknowledgement, there is something very important I want you to recognize. You are not trying to get back to who you were. As you remove what is no longer you, I want you to sit with this question. Who are you becoming? Not who you've been, not who other people expect you to be, not the version of you who has spent years holding everything together, but the version of you who is quietly and steadily emerging underneath all of the doing, the striving, the coping, and the surviving. And there's a question that many women stop asking. For many women, this question lands somewhere tender because somewhere along the way, we stopped asking it. We became so focused on taking care of everyone else, meeting expectations, staying productive, being needed, being responsible, being strong, that the deeper question of who we actually are began fading into the background. And then something shifts. Maybe it's a symptom your body will no longer let you ignore. Maybe it's anxiety that suddenly feels impossible to override. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's resentment or grief. Or maybe it's simply a quiet inner knowing. Something about the way I've been living no longer fits. The moment can feel frightening, but often it's not a breakdown. It's an invitation. One of the most common things I hear in my practice is, I just want to feel like myself again. And that makes complete sense. When you've been dealing with fatigue, anxiety, pain, or simply feeling off, of course you want to return to something that felt better. But here is a gentle reframe. Sometimes feeling like yourself again means returning to a version of you who is also exhausted, also overextended, also running on fumes. but just more familiar. And familiar isn't always the same as healthy. What if healing isn't about going back? As we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one simple thought. If perimenopause and menopause has made you feel like you've changed, you are probably right. But that doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong. It may mean your nervous system is no longer willing or no longer able to carry the same burdens in the same way. Maybe the anxiety isn't simply anxiety. Maybe the exhaustion isn't simply exhaustion. Maybe the overwhelm isn't simply overwhelm. Maybe they're invitations. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope that wherever you are in your journey, whether you're in perimenopause or menopause or dealing with hormonal imbalances, you leave this episode with a little more kindness toward yourself than you came in with, especially as you navigate these important life transitions. If you're ready to explore what deeper nervous system support could look like for you, I'd love to connect. You can book a wellness consultation at bodyandbalancechiropractic.com. Together, we'll look at what your body actually needs to heal at whatever pace is right for you. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to understand how the nervous system changes during these phases of life. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review for the podcast. Your reviews help more people discover these conversations about healing, nervous system health, and living beyond the symptoms. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. And until next time, breathe deeply, take time for yourself, and remember, your story is still unfolding. Thanks again for joining me today on Healing Beyond the Symptoms. If you've been curious about network spinal, or if you've tried everything else and still feel stuck, I want you to know this. Your body is not broken. It's patterned, and those patterns can change. If you're ready to experience how gentle care can lead to profound transformation, I'd love to invite you to book a wellness consultation at bodyandbalancechiropractic.com. Together, we'll look at what your body needs to finally release, reset, and thrive. Until next time, breathe deep, trust your body, and remember, gentle can be powerful.